It's always been someone else who sits in front of the mirror. I've never really put myself in that place. If I can't save Wolfgang, then at the very least, maybe I can live for him. Yeah, I can do this. I can fulfill the life he wasn't able to live. Like a chameleon, I will adapt. I'll follow in Wolfgang's footsteps and continue what he wasn't able to accomplish. I'll become something new! Hi guys, I'm Kyoka Xiavon and welcome back to my channel! If you've watched some of my recent streams, you'll know that I'm going through major Project Eden's Garden brain rot right now, so it's no surprise that my next video essay will be about it. Today I'm going to yap about what makes the first chapter so great. Plus there'll be some of my own theories sprinkled in, so you're all in for a treat. Project Eden's Garden is a fan game of Danganronpa, a game series I have talked about only a teeny tiny bit. The prologue was released in 2022, and Chapter 1 released almost exactly 2 years later. Peg is really good. I love the characters, the music, the artwork, the voice acting, programming, sound design, everything! So much effort went into creating this game, and I love how passionate the team is about the project. This video has spoilers for both the prologue and Chapter 1, so if you haven't played the game, then pause the video, play it and come back when you're done. If you don't, you'll be missing out on peak, so play the game. It's free and linked in the description. You have no excuses. Also, don't forget to subscribe. It's not easy to make Marabucks these days, so I would really appreciate it. But enough dilly-dallying. Let's hop on that train and make our way to Project Eden's Garden. As Peg is a fangan, it follows the same premise as a Danganronpa game. 16 talented students are forced to participate in a killing game, which is run by some sort of animal mascot. The first thing I noticed about this game when the prologue released was how mature it felt. While it followed a Danganronpa story structure, both the characters and the setting felt more serious compared to the original games, which makes sense as Danganronpa is known for its contrast of anime silliness with very dark topics. While I enjoy the atmosphere of both, I love how Peg has made an identity for itself that separates it from its source material. While some fangans are set in the same universe as Danganronpa, Peg isn't, so I think this difference in tone helps separate the two. While I'm not going to get too much into the prologue as this video is primarily about the latest chapter, I do want to at least briefly address it, as I think it was such a strong start to the game. My favourite part of the prologue was the mock trial, as we were able to see all the characters in a trial setting. I'm surprised that the original DR games ever did this, as I think it helps flesh out the characters and it makes their portrait appearing in the trial room after their death feel even more ominous. The prologue was a complete success. It perfectly establishes the characters and setting, and as the player, you cannot help but feel hyped for future chapter releases. That being said, let's now discuss the main topic of today's video, Chapter 1, Beneath the Veil of Hypocrisy. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to start with the story or characters first, but I decided that starting with the story just makes more sense, so let's do it. Chapter 1 begins with Damon going to his room after the mock trial. Apart from as Damon describes, sexy calendar, Damon's room contains a podium, a chess set, and bookshelves full of fake books. As we know that Wolfgang's room contained real books, I cannot help but think that this is a reference to how Damon is perceived as a bargain bin lawyer by his peers. Something important to note is that the lock to Damon's room is broken. When Damon falls asleep, we are greeted with a Tozu Theatre, which we will see every time Damon goes beddy-buys. While I did really like them, I find them super cryptic, so at the moment I'm not sure how they tie into the main story, but if anyone has any theories about that, then please let me know in the comments. The only one that I thought could be relevant was the last one, where he mentioned a bomb out of nowhere, which could be referencing Wolfgang's death, which could suggest that all of Chapter 1's Tozu Theatres are based on either Wolfgang or Eva. The next day, the students discover that a new area of the school has been unlocked. The Alpha Sanctuary is an old-timey looking pharmacy. Some of the rooms include a lab, a shop, and an infirmary. In one of the rooms, Eva finds a secret message that can only be seen from a certain point in the room, as it's one of those optical illusion thingies. This message ends up being an advertisement for Tozu plushies, which are sadly not attainable in-game. I guess my Tozu Gotchi will have to do. After investigating all the new areas, the students find a hidden door and a keypad behind one of the cabinets. After trying unsuccessfully to open the door, their report cards appear on their Tozu trinkets. Eva tries to stop everyone from looking at them, and while they agree to out of respect for each other's privacy, Winona encourages everyone to look at Eva's profile. This is where we get the first plot twist of the chapter, as Eva isn't the ultimate liar. She's the ultimate mathlete. I did not see this coming at all, but it is such a good twist. Honestly, my reaction to this was just about the same as all the other characters.
What is it? She's the ultimate nerd! Ultimate mathlete? Oh my gosh.
I thought it was silly that she would cover up such a harmless talent, but of course I felt really bad for my reaction later in the chapter. Damon returns to his room and he hears someone messing with his lock. He opens the door and finds Desmond and the rest of the group outside. Desmond has been testing everyone's door locks, confirming that they were all broken. As a way to make everyone less vulnerable, the group decides to assign themselves roommates. Before anything is decided, Grace, Kai and Mark beg Z to not be with Eva. Poor girl. Thankfully, Diana steps up and she becomes bunk buddies with Eva. The group splits into two to assign the rest of the roommates, and after losing to Jean in rock, paper, scissors, Damon ends up bunking with Kai. As a Kai fan, this was the best case scenario for me, as it meant that he would get a decent amount of screen time this chapter, and believe me, it did not disappoint. Kai ends up separating their room with tape, resulting in Damon sleeping on the sofa. The next day, Damon goes to leave Kai's room, but instead spots two envelopes on the ground, one with Damon's name and the other with Kai's. Damon opens the envelope and finds a picture of two people, one of them looking almost identical to Wolfgang. After further analysis of the picture, he realises that this picture depicts Wolfgang's parents on their wedding day. Kai shows Damon what his envelope contained, a picture of Cassidy and the message, "Foolish nerd, this spider never leaves her web, except to sell pastries." I don't really know what this means, but I'm assuming that we'll find out through Cassidy's free time events. This prompts Damon to flip over his own picture, where he finds this quote: "Like father, like son, beneath a sheep's skin hides a wolfish mind," which goes so hard. Like, Tozu should be a writer. That was stunning, babes. Kai and Damon go to the dining hall and they discover that everyone had received an envelope containing someone else's secret. It's through this conversation that we discover that Jet had Toshiko's, which, like Cassidy, seemed pretty harmless. Wolfgang advises the group to privately meet with whose blackmail you have, which isn't a terrible idea, but I honestly think that they should have just revealed everyone's secrets to the group, as then it makes the motive redundant. Something to note about the conversation is at one point Tozu mentions that Mara is keeping a very close eye on them, which to me emphasises her lack of presence in this chapter. Maybe she was pretending to be one of the students, though that would be a pretty insane twist that honestly would be very unnecessary, as both Tozu and Mara seem to be able to travel through the academy pretty seamlessly, so they would not need to be that close to the students at all times. But hey, that's just a theory. A Kyoka! Damon thinks he's not like the other girls and believes that there was a reason that he received Wolfgang's motive, so he leaves a note for Tozu on the camera in his room asking to meet him in the boiler room that night. We then get our first two free time events of the chapter. I don't really understand how to play the pachinko machine, but I think it's a really cool way to earn more Mara bucks. I ended up going to my two favourite characters first, Wolfgang and Kai. I'll get into the free time events later, but I love how varied all the characters' free times are, and how you aren't able to hang out with certain characters, as it makes the player be more strategic in who they choose to hang out with. After Tozu's nighttime announcement, Damon heads down to the boiler room. Damon waits for a while, thinking that Tozu wouldn't show up, but eventually he does. He reveals to Damon that the blackmail was assigned by throwing darts, and that him getting Wolfgang's was purely a coincidence. Damon tries to convince Tozu to tell him what the message on the back of the picture meant, but he doesn't fall for the bait, and instead tells Damon to figure it out himself. He does give Damon a small hint after he practically begs for it, which is that the likeliest answer is usually the most obvious, and that the answer might have already revealed itself. Which to me suggests that Wolfgang's behaviour during the mock trial, and him taking a leader-esque position in the group, is similar to how his dad acted, which could mean that Tozu knew Wolfgang's dad. While he could have discovered this info by going through Wolfgang's belongings, his blackmail is far more personal than the other ones that we know of, suggesting that Tozu could have a history with Papa Akira. When Damon goes back upstairs, he overhears Grace and Ulysses swapping rooms. This means that Grace is now bunking with Wolfgang and Ulysses is with Winona. It's here where Grace comments on Wolfgang's linguistics, suggesting that there is more going on between the two than one meets the eye. Afterwards, Damon goes to Kai's room. Kai questions him about where he was, and Damon makes up an excuse about having dinner. Kai accepts it, and the two go to sleep. The next morning, Ingrid reminds Damon of him agreeing to help her with the laundry. I didn't have the heart to say no to Queen Ingrid in the pharmacy, and I haven't seen a playthrough that did, so I'm not sure if this scene still happens if you say no, but Kai ends up coming along to help. In the laundry room, we discover that Wolfgang and Grace have also agreed to help. After Wolfgang disproves the house husband's allegations, the group gets to work. We see a beautifully drawn CG accompanied by Ingrid's amazing singing. Queen should be the ultimate Disney princess with those pipes, honestly! Wolfgang tries to pour a whole bottle of detergent into the washing machine, and Kai and Damon judge from afar, as all besties do. I am really happy that I got to see this scene, as it's just so cute, and I hope that there'll be more scenes like this in future chapters. Afterwards, Kai invites Damon to the dining hall for breakfast, but before they can enter, they're interrupted by Eva. She asks to speak to Damon in private, and while Kai is initially against Damon going, he allows it, though of course he has to mock Eva's talent before he leaves. She takes Damon to one of the spare rooms in the basement and shows him Desmond's blackmail. It reads, "With his weapons in hand, Desmond guards the only one he trusts." Strangely, his blackmail does not contain a picture and is only the message. When Damon questions why she showed him Desmond's blackmail, she reveals that she trusts him as no one else sided with her at the end of the mock trial. Damon shows her the blackmail he received and she deduces that Wolfgang is suspicious. Damon then asks her why she pretended to be the ultimate liar, and Eva explains that she didn't want to feel powerless, and that she feels like the fake title she gave herself suits her more than her real one does. Eva still hasn't figured out what the plushie advertisement means, making that mystery still at large. This is one of my favourite scenes in Chapter 1 as it perfectly encapsulates Eva and Damon's friendship. They work well together in the killing game as they see eye to eye, though I'm sure that in a normal scenario, these two would have definitely become besties. They return to the dining hall and see Grace threaten Eloise to hand over her blackmail. While Grace didn't know who had her blackmail, she deduced that it was Eloise due to her strange behaviour. It is interesting that she discovered that Mark had Ingrid's, which suggests that Grace is a really observant person, or that Mark just told her, but I don't think he would. While Ingrid's blackmail was tame, I'm surprised that Mark didn't react at all to Grace knowing that he had Ingrid's. I think that Grace is really smart, but this isn't much of a surprise as she was one of the only useful members of the group in the mock trial. Eloise hands Grace her blackmail, confirming that she did in fact have hers. While Grace rips it apart and flushes it down the sink, Wolfgang questions why Damon and Eva were late. While he is very suspicious of them, I think he also does this to distract the others so they're not all looking at Grace. Damon says that they were discussing the blackmail in private like he told them to, and this makes Wolfgang slightly taken aback as he had automatically assumed the worst of them. Cassidy and Jet burst into the room and announce that they will be holding a Slam Sisters game tournament. When they try to figure out what time they should hold the tournament, Eva suggests that they should do it at 9 AM as that is when the brain is the most active. We then get our next round of free times. For this one, I did Eva and Kai's. Afterwards, we see Diana in the dorm hallway. While the sudden conversation seems suspicious, Diana simply asks Damon how he and Eva are doing as she's worried about them. Damon then goes to Kai's room, and when Kai discovers that Damon has no intention of going to the tournament, he convinces him to go with him in the promise of giving him bed privileges. And thus Damon was given a bed to sleep in once more. The next morning, Kai forces Damon to wake up after discovering that they had slept through the morning announcement. Kai panics, thinking they'll be late to the tournament, but the dining hall is literally a 30-second walk down the hall. It's really not that serious, bestie. Regardless, Kai rushes out of the room and Damon follows. They arrive early to the tournament. Eva, Cassidy, Mark and Jet are already there, which is when we discover that Eva also helped set up the tournament. We see that Eva is holding something akin to a DS with some sort of thing attached to it, and she explains that she only wants to watch the tournament and not participate, as she prefers to play games alone. We also find out that Eva used to eat lunch in the school toilets, which is just so sad. Just before the tournament begins, Grace and Jean enter. When Grace insists that he forced her to come with him, Jean says that it was actually the reverse, and that Grace had insisted that they go together. Now that everyone had arrived, the tournament could begin, starting with Kai versus Damon. We get another amazing CG as they begin the first round. It's clear that Damon is fighting a losing battle, as Kai is slaying him left, right, and centre. Just as Damon is about to release a powerful attack, there's a blackout. I love how loud this moment is with the video game sounds, the music, and the voice acting, because when the blackout hits, the sudden silence is even more ominous. The group panics at first, but discovers that they could use the light from the Tozu trinkets to see. Then, they form a daisy chain link with their arms and make their way down to the basement to turn on the spare generator. When they arrive, they split into pairs to explore the 4 rooms. Damon ends up with Kai, and the two go into one of the rooms. While inside, they hear someone run past.
Huh?
Who's running? Why are you running? Why are you running?
They leave the room and discover that they are the only ones in the hallway. Damon deduces that the footsteps came from the boiler room and goes over in silence, ignoring Kai's attempts to get him to speak. When they enter, it is pitch black, so they cannot see anything. But even then, it's clear that something horribly wrong happened in there. Kai begs for someone to turn on the power, which they do. As electricity returns to the building, we see the first real crime scene of the game. Laying in the water, with tears staining his cheeks and the ground below him, was Wolfgang. And thus, the killing game had truly began. Wow, this chapter just has so much content, and I like how the daily life was structured. It gave us all the beats that a Danganronpa chapter should. A new area to explore, a motive, free times, but I loved all the character moments that were sprinkled in between, such as the scenes of Kai and the conversation we had with Diana. Wolfgang's death was so brilliantly done, especially the crime scene itself, as I was so heartbroken to see him in such a state. I mean, this was literally my reaction to his death.
Enough for me to see what was laying up. Oh my god. Okay. Oh, I'm so scared. Oh my god, who is it? Who is it? Who is it? Who is it? No, bestie! Jesus! That's my bestie!
The woman was too stunned to speak.
While I obviously didn't want him to die as he was one of my favourites, I think that he had a really great run. While there is a concern of him being another umami, I'm confident that Wolfgang won't be given the same treatment, as the writing in this game is so good. As a writer myself, I really admire how the writers approach the story and characters. It makes me want to write my own killing game, but I never will as I'm really bad at writing mysteries. When I first started the investigation, I had slight suspicions of Eva, as I thought the vent could have had a part in the murder, which is actually insane that I clocked onto that so fast. But I pushed that theory aside as I tend to second guess myself, and we didn't investigate the vent, so I assumed it wasn't relevant to the case. Oh, how wrong I was. During the investigation, Grace guards her in Wolfgang's room. The only things we see are their clothes placed around the room and a cute little teddy bear on the bed. After the investigation, it was time to enter the lift and to descend to the trial grounds. At this point in time, I genuinely had no idea who it was. I was fluctuating between Eva, Diana, and Toshiko, and I'm sorry Toshiko fans, I know she's just a child, but she's a little bit suspicious. During the trial, the group believes that Diana is suspicious due to her lack of alibi, and we finally discover why she had been acting so strange. Like Wolfgang, Diana had received a letter to go to the boiler room, though hers instructed her to go there about half an hour after Wolfgang's did. In the boiler room, she finds a disorientated Wolfgang laying in the water. When she calls his name, he gets to his feet and says he's finally happy to meet her, suggesting that he mistook Diana for someone else, most likely his mum. As Wolfgang laments, Diana tries to guide him out of the water, but instead he whips out a knife he had grabbed from the kitchen earlier. He nicked her on the arm, spilling blood onto the ground. Diana panicked and grabbed the taser, but she couldn't bring herself to use it. Wolfgang continues his delirious speech, saying that he'll never be like you, and that he will never give up until everyone knows him as something. That something we'll never know, as in that moment, the generator explodes and Wolfgang is electrocuted. This scene is so well done and so chilling. I love all the crazy sprites that Wolfgang has, and it's so sad to think that this very intelligent man, who seemed to have a majority of the group's best interests at heart, would be killed in such a torturous way. Honestly, I should have seen it coming, especially as Eva makes so many references to the water in the boiler room. Girlie really has been planning this from the start, huh? After Diana tells the group her story, the player can split off into two paths, Paphos and Logos. I went with the Paphos route as it was easier, but also I wanted the sad little man Damon Maitsu to feel something. Pathos is the route where Damon sympathises with Diana and decides that she couldn't be a killer due to her personality, and Logos is the route where he deduces that she isn't the killer through physical evidence. Either way, we come to the conclusion that Diana wasn't the killer. So, who was? It eventually comes down to that vent, and who was sitting in front of it? Eva Tsunaka, the ultimate mathlete. I still can't believe that I was right about this, but after a 5-hour trial, it is finally time for the killer to be punished. While the trial was really long, I heavily enjoyed it, so much so that the time just flew by. The mystery was really compelling, and I wasn't expecting 2 important characters to go in one chapter, so when I realised it actually was Eva, I was really surprised. I also loved the Tozu tea time section at the halfway point. The art for it was really cute, and hearing Tozu trash talk sheep was tragically hilarious. After Eva is backed into a corner, we enter the boss fight minigame, Argument Altercation, a bullet frenzy minigame where the player must shoot Eva with truth bullets while dodging her attacks. Then, they must answer a question by forming the answer. I really liked how unique this minigame was, and I really appreciate how much effort went into it. I wish I could have enjoyed it more in the moment, but it took me so long to complete that I was just losing my marbles. While this is definitely a skill issue on my part, I was playing on normal, so I hope that the minigame is made slightly easier in the future chapters. That being said, I think this minigame was a great addition, and I'm excited to see who we will battle in the future. In the end, the group votes for Eva, who is the true Black Wind of this case. After the trial, we discover that Eva had figured out what the pin was to the door, as the advertisement in the lab was actually a well-hidden equation, and the answer to that equation was the pin. Inside, she found the DS thing, which allowed her to see through every camera in the academy. However, she would only be allowed to take this perk if she agreed to murder someone. And she did. From there, she planned and successfully killed Wolfgang. While I do feel a lot of sympathy for Eva, as she felt like she had to accept the perk as the whole group mistreated her, she became what she feared she was, a threat. And she killed Wolfgang in a way that would ensure that he would suffer. She also used Diana by making her a fake culprit, even though Diana had been nothing but kind towards her, though Eva just assumed that Diana's kindness towards her was fake. We then see the first execution of this game, Fiery Furnace of Affliction. Eva is dragged by that iconic claw, and she's placed on a conveyor belt. Behind her, a massive pit of flames. In front of her, the exit. She quickly gets to her feet and runs towards the exit, but it's never that easy. The conveyor belt becomes an incline, then a staircase, making it almost impossible for her to reach the top. To throw salt into the wound, they throw a bunch of mathematical tools at her like compasses and protractors. Basically all the stuff I never understood how to use. Eva continues to run, putting up a good fight, but she trips and falls into the sharp objects below her. They cut into her arms and legs, making her scream in pain, but she keeps going. She crawls upwards, even slipping down the conveyor belt, but she doesn't give up. Eventually she reaches the top. Kara appears out of nowhere and holds out her hand. Eva takes it, but of course it snaps off, as Kara was only a dummy. Eva gives us one last terrified expression before she's engulfed by flames. The last thing we see is Eva's feather fluttering to the ground, and the horrified expressions of the remaining students. What an execution! This was so good! The storytelling was immaculate and it was so painful to watch, which is what I believe makes a brilliant execution. The small details from her holding onto the podium to her running, then crawling, then falling to her death was just so well paced. The first execution is always iconic, and Eva's was just that. Afterwards, the whole group is left in shock after witnessing such a horrifying scene. Diana feels an immense amount of survivor's guilt, and as a result, she decides that she will avenge him by living the life that he would have. While this seems to be a heroic moment, it doesn't win over the rest of the group. After the others have left, Damon reflects on what had happened. He comes to the conclusion that Diana's actions have pissed him off. And with that, Chapter 3 is finally complete. This chapter was a thrilling ride from start to finish, and a great way to start the killing game. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, and the ending did not disappoint. I'm really excited to see where the story will go from here, specifically how Diana will act in future chapters, and if any of the other students will take over Wolfgang's leadership role. That being said, let's now discuss the characters of this chapter, starting with the victim, Wolfgang Arcure. As I have mentioned, Wolfgang is one of my favourite characters, as I find him to be a really interesting guy. Addressing the elephant in the room, his character is simultaneously a Detroit Become Human and an Ace Attorney reference, though of course he's a lot more than that. So let's get into it. From the get-go, we assume that he will be a big deal as he gets loads of screen time, and he seems to be a direct foil for Damon. He got incredibly angry for Kara in the mock trial, even though she was just a dummy. This, along with his politeness towards women, would suggest that he has a great amount of respect for women, and that he is a very emotional person. We learn through his free time events that Wolfgang had been hearing about cases from a young age. This is most likely because his mum was a lawyer. He decided to follow her footsteps and become one himself. His mother was known for being a brilliant lawyer who would only defend women and children. As Wolfgang strongly admires his mum, we can assume that he based his own morality on hers. While this isn't necessarily an issue, it suggests that Wolfgang may have low self-esteem as he is so desperately trying to emulate his mother. Wolfgang only defends clients who he believes are innocent, which, ignoring that it's an Ace Attorney reference, shows how much of an emotional person Wolfgang is. While Wolfgang seems to be a very logical person, a lot of his actions are driven by emotion, which as a result makes him a terrible lawyer. He may be intelligent and eloquent, but his overwhelming emotions would eventually get the best of him. And as we saw in his final moments, it definitely did. Wolfgang's free time events are my favourite out of the whole cast, as while the others are your typical hangouts, every conversation with Wolfgang feels like a debate. Throughout his free time events, Wolfgang seems to be trying to figure out who Damon is, as personally, I believe that Wolfgang doesn't understand Damon, while Damon is just frustrated that such an intelligent man is so naive. I'm not surprised that Damon thinks this way, especially as Wolfgang has some sort of vendetta against him and Eva, and whenever he speaks, he seems to be looking down on him. But I think both are in the wrong, as Damon shouldn't be so selfish, but Wolfgang shouldn't be so critical of Damon. Wolfgang has a very black and white thinking, which is interesting as due to his righteous nature, you would think that he would give everyone a chance, but instead he isolates Damon and Eva from the rest of the group. Wolfgang is a really interesting character, as he's someone that you simultaneously root for but also don't. He is quick to hold prejudices against some, while being polite and considerate of the rest. He was a terrible leader, but he took the heavy burden of such a position with his head held high. Wolfgang is such an emotional person, and it adds so much to his character, even if his emotional nature made him a really flawed person. Wolfgang was the golden boy who was incredibly successful from a young age, but in the end, he died to his own hypocrisy. I really hope that we find out more about Wolfgang in the future, but regardless, he was a really great character who was tragically the first victim of the killing game, as it had to be someone. Eva Sinaka was the culprit of this chapter, and I love her, even after everything she did. Eva is highly intelligent and talented in many fields, making her a jack of all trades. We learn through her free time events that she constantly tries to prove herself in other fields apart from maths, but her efforts are ignored. To her, the ultimate title isn't evidence of her hard work, but instead, it's a cage that she can't escape. I'm not surprised that her FTEs are pretty much just about her talent, as the Mathlete twist was such a big shock and was absolutely brilliant. As Chapter 1 came out 2 years after the prologue, we believed during this time that Eva actually was the ultimate liar, and there were loads of theories surrounding her, but in the end she had lied about that, and now we get to see why. Throughout her free time events, Eva talks about how much she hates both her talent and the UTP, the Ultimate Talent Program, which is the association that assigns students their ultimate titles. I haven't had the chance to bring this up yet, but I find the UTP to be really interesting, and due to how much it's mentioned in not just Eva's but the other characters' free time events, I think it will be really important to the story going forward. Ultimates are intermingled with normal society, and the program has been active for a decent amount of time by this point in the story, as Desmond mentions in his FTEs that he comes from a line of Ultimate Marksmen. Eva was only assigned the Ultimate Mathlete title as no one else wanted it, and they had to give it to someone. Which I just find strange, as surely a title such as the Ultimate Mathlete could skip a generation, or she could have been given a more sophisticated title such as Ultimate Mathematician, but instead she stuck with Mathlete. Eva's character is centered around proving both to herself and to others that she is someone who should be admired for her intelligence, and she really should have been. She is skilled in many fields and has achieved so much in her short life, but instead of getting praised like Wolfgang was, she was made an outcast by her peers. Eva's main character flaw is her desperate attempts to prove her worth, as in the end, she drowns in her own self-pity. While I feel bad for Eva as she didn't have many friends in school, she just trusts anyone who even tries to be nice to her, which could even include Damon, even though she had trusted him enough to show him the blackmail she had received. I see a lot of my younger self in Eva. Not the murdering or smart aspects of her character, but everything else. I would say I was pretty nerdy in school, but more in the nerdy hobbies way rather than in an academic way. I was pretty shy, and I assumed that anyone who talked to me who wasn't my friend was just talking to me as a joke or because they wanted to make fun of me. While this was because I was teased for my sexuality as I had been unwillingly outed to my classmates, I wasn't majorly bullied in school or anything. I just assumed the worst of my peers because of that experience, just like Eva does. I really struggle with my self-esteem, and while that is something that I'm trying to improve on to this day, Eva just lets it take over her completely, and it's really sad. Eva really is an intelligent person whose self-loathing was her own downfall. While the other students at Eden's Garden weren't entirely nice to her, none of them deserved to be killed, but in her desperation, she took the perk and killed the one person she could never become. Eva is someone who suffered from success. She had no friends in school, and she was assigned a title that prevented her from becoming relevant in any other fields of study. But instead of owning it, she wallowed in self-pity. Wolfgang makes for an interesting contrast to Eva, as while he was incredibly successful as the young ultimate lawyer, Eva was unfairly treated by her peers and her maths competition trophies pale in comparison to 200 successful cases. I think she is the perfect choice for the first killer, though I will miss seeing her and Damon interact in future chapters. Overall, I'm really satisfied with her character, and maybe in another universe, her and Damon can nerd out together in the real Eden's Garden Academy. I wanted to give all the major characters in this chapter their own section, and I'd say that the next relevant character would be Kai, as he gets a lot of screen time throughout the chapter. Kai is my other favourite character from this cast, and as I was playing through this chapter, I realised how much we have in common. We both like butterflies, we're content creators, we like frappes, we're both failures, we're pretty much twins. From the get-go, Kai is pretty flamboyantly pathetic, though he also asks the real questions like, why don't they get a chair in the trial room? Those trials are long. In his free time events, we learn more about Kai's relationship with his fans, and it isn't great. As a content creator myself, I love having a community that I can get to know and geek out with, but Kai's relationship with his fans is way too parasocial. It gets to the point where his self-worth is dependent on how he is viewed by the public, which is a really interesting topic to explore for an influencer character in a killing game. It's kind of ironic, as while he says that he never has one-to-one interactions with his fans, he sees them as his closest friends, and he doesn't have anyone else. I think he began to grow overly attached to them after the incognito account controversy, as that was when he received an extensive amount of hate, which for someone with as low self-confidence as Kai, this would have been devastating for his mental health. But even in this rough patch, his fans were still there for him, and this was where his unhealthy attachment towards them began. As his sense of humour and personality became so mainstream online, it became his brand. It was the UTP that brought him so much controversy in the first place. Speaking of the UTP, I wonder how titles such as Kai's are treated by the general public, as I'm assuming that the Ultimate Influencer title must be pretty new. Does the public like the idea of introducing new titles, or is it not taken seriously as it's not a title of a long lineage? Regardless, it's clear that Kai is a talented young person who is overly reliant on social media. But if you guys can't tell, I love the UTP in this game, and I do hope we learn more about it, and I'm just praying that I'm right and that it is relevant to the main story. Please, the lore is interesting. Kai heavily edits all of his photos to the point where even Grace calls him out for it, saying that he has the face of a horse, which is pretty harsh. But after seeing Nefast's echo art of Kai, the difference between his real and online self is crazy. Bro is really good at photo editing. While I do think Kai is a very lonely person who has an unhealthy attachment to his fans, he doesn't stop them from attacking people online, which is pretty irresponsible of him. Personally, I think that Kai craves attention from others, as he's afraid of being completely alone, so it's no surprise that he stuck close to Damon for most of the second half of the chapter, and we'll most likely be seeing more of this in the future chapters. I would love for Kai to become Damon's main support character, as while most support characters in Danganronpa are pretty competent, self-assured individuals, he is quite the opposite, so it'll be interesting to see Damon and Kai learn from each other. All in all, Kai is one of those characters that you either love or hate. Yes, he's a bit annoying at times, and he was ruder to Eva than he definitely should have been, but I think he's a really interesting character, as he is very open about his emotions. I'm curious to see how this will contrast with Damon suppressing his own emotions. We love you, Diva. Keep slaying. So Diana is an interesting one, as while she isn't too relevant in the chapter as a whole, she gets a big character moment at the end of the trial, so I think that she deserves her own section. She is arguably the kindest person out of the whole cast. She's very considerate of others, and she's the only member of the cast who looks out for Damon and especially Eva. While she only has 2 free time events in this chapter, we understand that Diana is a social chameleon of sorts, someone who adjusts their personality depending on what the situation calls for. This makes a lot of sense as her talent is all about manipulating the appearance of others, giving them a cosmetic mask to hide in. Diana finds inner beauty in everything, including the people she meets, and this is why she's an ultimate. She doesn't just put makeup on people, she uses it as a canvas to put their inner beauty on full display. Diana considers all the students in the killing game to be her friends, and she's quick to connect with others. She specifically admired Wolfgang for his leadership skills, which makes that moment in the boiler room that much sadder. Helplessly watching your friend die is one thing, but to find out that the girl you had desperately tried to befriend had set you up to be framed for your friend's murder just makes it so much worse. This is a terrible thing for anyone to go through, but instead of processing her feelings, she suppresses them. Driven with survivor's guilt, Diana declares that she will live for Wolfgang, to live the life that he couldn't. But he did. Prior to the killing game, Wolfgang was a young, talented lawyer with an impressive array of achievements. She does not need to live for him. And yet she will, as if she doesn't, her guilt will eat her up alive. This shows how selfless Diana really is, though in a killing game that will only bring her more suffering. I really like this moment at the end of the trial. No one else felt the way that she did. Their hopes had been crushed, and yet here's Diana with this heroic yet naive declaration that could only be seen as hollow. Unfortunately for Diana, she is not the protagonist of this killing game, so she most likely won't be able to save them all, but at the very least, it's the thought that counts. While we didn't get many free times with her, I really enjoyed them as she and Damon are polar opposites. Damon suppresses his emotions and hates seeing others be controlled by their own emotions, and this is exactly what Diana does. In a way, they're each other's worst enemy, as while Damon disvalues connecting with others, Diana's attachment to her peers is what drives her own self-confidence. I really love the moment in her second FTE where Damon gets frustrated when she calls him her friend, as he believes that he could not have any friends in a killing game. The reason why I like this moment so much is because it demonstrates how considerate Damon really is. Even if he constantly tries to shove his feelings aside, he actively warns Diana of how destructive her attachment towards others is, and yet Diana diverts the conversation once more, insinuating that Damon truly did care about her, and he does, but he would never admit that. Out of all the characters in this game, I am the most curious to see how Diana will develop throughout the game, whether she'll become jaded and cynical like Damon, or whether she'll contain a mask of toxic positivity throughout. Regardless, the writers did a really great job of her character in this chapter, and I'm excited to see how she develops in the future. Last, and certainly not least, it's time to discuss the protagonist of this killing game, the ultimate debater, Damon Maitsu. So, Damon is probably my favourite protagonist from any Danganronpa game, solely because of how critical he is of his peers. Never before have we played such an insufferable douche, and I love it. From any other perspective, he would be the antagonist of the story. From the get-go, we understand how important his talent is to him, and understandably so. He was able to prove that he was the best of the best, but as a result, he became a more cold and unsympathetic person. He sees his classmates as beneath him, as he believes that his talent is superior to theirs. And I think this will be really important going forward, especially as his closest friend thus far, Eva, represented all the problems that could come from having an ultimate title. While I don't think I would enjoy his character as much if he wasn't the protagonist, I love hearing his inner thoughts as he's constantly debating with himself. While he says that he doesn't trust his peers, he does. Pathos route aside, he trusted Eva even if he was frustrated at Diana for doing the same thing. Damon had to shove his emotions aside in order to become successful, but now they're coming back to bite him. Personally, I think Damon naturally cares for others, but he suppressed this as he didn't want to be perceived as weak. As there is essentially a logic route and emotion route in the trials, I think this will reach a climax by the end of the game. Will Damon accept his emotions and attempt to save everyone from the killing game, or will he become a heartless man who sacrifices everyone for his own benefit? We'll just have to wait and see. Damon is such a refreshing protagonist, and I really hope that he will at least survive for a while, because his perspective is so unique, and I really enjoy seeing how he interacts with the other characters. All in all, Damon is a really fun protagonist, even if he is such a hater, as that's what makes him so great. Now, I want to briefly discuss the rest of the cast, as while I don't have as much to say about them, they still deserve their flowers. starting with Mark Bursky, as I honestly don't have much to say about him. We don't learn much about him in his FTEs, apart from that he's a famous producer, but you hear about that in the main story anyway. I will say, I do love how awkwardly relaxing his FTEs are. I think in a normal setting, he and Damon would definitely be good friends. There's a lot of mystery surrounding Mark's character, and I think it will be revealed in future chapters, so I'm excited to see what he'll do. Toshiko's another character that is a bit of a question mark for me. She's the youngest by quite a lot, and she constantly covers her face, so I cannot help but find her mysterious, even if her character seems fairly childishly silly otherwise. I don't have too much of an attachment to her currently, but I'm curious to see where her character will go. Jet was one of my favourites from the prologue, and I still really enjoyed his character. He's pretty goofy, but it's clear from his FTEs that he's very insecure about his appearance, specifically his face. I think this will be developed further as the game goes on, but at the moment I think he's fun comedic relief. Winona is the character who is the most similar to Damon, the difference between them being that Damon is more outspoken on his opinions, while Winona only gives them when she deems it necessary. We learn in her FTEs how business savvy she is. Winona is really smart, and probably is the smartest in the whole cast. But because of that, I don't think she'll be easy to kill. I love how she humbles Damon, as while he saw them as equals, she knew that she was leagues above him. We love a confident queen. Ulysses is a character that I cannot help but feel bad for. He is very intelligent, but he is physically weaker than most, and his lack of smell is raising some major death flags. While I really don't want him to die early, I think he will, as he was very useful in Chapter 1's trial, and his notebook could be detrimental evidence in future trials, so I think he's just too OP to stick around for long. Let's just hope that I'm wrong. Cassidy has a similar role to Jet, though her exaggerated personality is at the very least a bit forced, as she seems to be really smart, even if she tries to hide it. I love how she only plays games as she enjoys them, and she rejects the prestige that she received from her title. I think Cassidy is really interesting, and she's by far the funniest character in the whole cast. Desmond is a chill guy who catches strays for no reason from Wolfgang. Like seriously, what's that guy's problem? As I mentioned earlier, he's from a line of ultimates which I think is really interesting. It makes me hope that we'll get to hear more about the history of the UTP. Desmond himself is very dedicated, which is a trait I really admire. If the number one hater Damon Maitu likes you, then you must be a pretty great guy. Eloise's FTEs were really surprising, in a good way. I liked how she didn't let Damon walk all over her, as she's the only character to fight back, which I really respect. There are so many layers to her, as at first I just thought she would be the shy, non-confrontational character of the cast, but she's actually pretty aggressive, which makes me wonder if we'll see her lash out against Grace in the future chapters. Jean is another character that surprised me. He's really intelligent and a great leader, which isn't that shocking now I think about it, as it's literally his talent, but that just shows how unassuming he is. You think he'll just be a silly pirate guy, when he's so much more than that. I love seeing him take the lead in the trial, and I just hope that he sticks around for a while, as I really enjoy his character. Out of the whole cast, we know the least about Grace, but this is mostly because we do not get any FTEs with her in this chapter. She really interests me, as while she's a very aggressive individual, she also mocks the other characters and seems to take joy in it. It's surprising that she got close to Wolfgang, as she seems to dislike pretty much everyone in the Killing Game. She's by far the character that I would want to learn the most about, and hopefully she has a leading role in the chapters going forward. The final student in this Killing Game is Ingrid, and she is just so sweet. I like her a lot, but unfortunately she's quite forgettable in this chapter. I think she is a really strong person who is very considerate of others, and I really like that about her. I just hope that her kindness doesn't get her in harm's way. So, Tozu. I think he's a really great mastermind, as he's simultaneously hilarious and terrifying. My personal theory is that he was similar to Eva, in the sense that he got a title he disliked and as a result, despises the UTP and Ultimates in general. Or, he was never given a title no matter how hard he tried to attain one, and this Killing Game is an act of revenge. I really do think the UTP will play a big part in the main story, and if it doesn't now, it'll be really embarrassing because I've mentioned it so many times. And I think it would be really interesting if that was his main motivation for the Killing Game. Tozu is always enjoyable whenever he's on screen, and I can't wait to learn more about him. And honestly, when I said that he was terrifying earlier, I meant it. In the prologue, I saw his shadow in Kara's crime scene, and it was so scary. I did not like it at all. And I heard recently that you can actually see his shadow as well in Chapter 1. I had honestly had no idea about this. I'll post the tweet that mentions it in the description, but this is so creepy. Just the fact that Tozu does just casually walk around the school whenever he wants. It's like an actual horror movie. But that just shows how good the writing is for this. And I really hope that they lean a bit more into the horror aspects later down the line. I would talk about Mara and Kara, but I really don't have much to say about them except that they have similar names, so take that as you will. With that being said, that's all the characters. What a cast! All these characters are so rich, and the voice acting perfectly brings them all to life. While it is sad that we lost Wolfgang and Eva, they were fantastic characters and I can't wait to learn more about them and the rest of the cast. Here's my current ranking of the characters, which I base on how much I enjoy them and how effective they are in the story. After completing Chapter 1, I've made my official predictions on who I think will be the Blackened, a victim or the mastermind. And honestly, you don't need to analyse this too much, this was mostly vibes. I will say, if Ulysses isn't the mastermind, then I think Cassidy is. Also, I have a really bad feeling that Kai won't survive, but I put him as a survivor on my predictions because I'm manifesting. Apart from my UTP Tozu theories, I don't really have any others at the moment, so let's just throw some random ones out there. Tozu will kill someone for breaking the rules. Kara and Mara are the same person. Diana will be the last Blackened. Someone will attempt a murder and fail. Someone will try to kill Damon. There will be 2 crime scenes in one chapter, but only the first culprit will be killed. Someone will die in front of the whole group. And last but not least, we will try and find out what Damon's blackmail was. I plan to make a video like this for every chapter, so we'll see if any of these were right or wrong, though they're probably all wrong. Chapter 1 was such a strong start to the story for so many reasons. The case was well thought out and tragic, the execution was impressively brutal, all of the FTEs were so unique, the soundtrack was amazing, the art was stunning, this project is truly something special. So much love and hard work was put into making this game a reality. I didn't intend for this video to be so long, but there is so much content in this one chapter which just shows how much effort went into this game. I've been a fan of Danganronpa for a really long time, and it's games like this one that remind me of why I fell in love with the series in the first place. Playing through Chapter 1 felt like experiencing the original series all over again, and I'm so happy that this game, and other projects like it, exist. Even if you're not a Danganronpa fan, this game is certainly worth your time. Project Eden's Garden is an amalgamation of so many talented individuals' work, and I know that they will have a very bright future ahead of them. Thank you for making such an incredible fan game. I can't wait to see how the rest of the story unravels, and thank you for reigniting my love for Danganronpa. This video was so much fun to make, even if I worked on it for longer than I wanted to. I originally wanted this video to come out a lot sooner, but hey, it's here now! I have been struggling with burnout recently, especially with writing, but making these videos have been really helpful in aiding my own creative practice as a writer, so we're steadily getting back on track. I'm probably going to be releasing another video essay fairly soon, as Alien Stage destroyed me, but if you have any suggestions for any future videos to do with Eden's Garden, then please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you all soon. Bye bye! Whistling while I work. Animals licking dishes. If the health inspector finds out, I'll be swimming with the fishes.